afternoon. I'm Colleen Carlson with the University of Minnesota Extension. I'm a local county extension educator in Carver and Scott County. I come from a long line of chicken keepers, about 5 generations, but that does not mean that I'm by any means an expert. But I like chickens. I've kept a flock since the 9th grade on a continuous basis. So today we're here to talk about preparing your poultry coop for the winter. And also joining me in our conversation today is Wayne Martin. He is an extension educator based on the St. Paul campus. And Abby Neuschaft is implementing our program, doing the IT, and she is a regional poultry educator based out of Wilmer. We want to welcome everybody here today, and if you haven't put it in the chat box, please include how many chickens you're keeping right now. We know that it can be a challenge to keep chickens over winter. I certainly have had my ups and downs with it, and it also depends on what kind of Minnesota weather we're going to have here. So first of all, let's just define what backyard chickens are. According to the USDA Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, all chickens raised with access to the outdoors are backyard chickens, regardless whether they have been raised in an urban backyard hobby setting or in a commercial pasture enterprise. The number of chickens in your flock does not matter. Another definition that's going to help us in our conversation today is what the thermoneutral zone is. So this is the range of environmental temperatures in which an organism can comfortably maintain its body temperature. A living body can only maintain its core temperature when heat production and heat loss are balanced. And for most poultry, the thermoneutral zone is between 60 and 75 degrees. Now, this is going to be based on the age of the chicken and also the breed of the chicken, if it's a light breed or a standard breed or heavy or a dual purpose breed, and depends on how big that their mature weight is. And then the average body temperature for a chicken is 106 degrees. And when the body temperature goes above 117 degrees, the bird will die. And of course, if it gets too cold, the bird will freeze to death. The other thing is that when a chicken lays an egg, the egg weight, its temperature is between 106 and 109 degrees. But today we're going to talk about preparing your coop for winter weather, and there's a lot of aspects that need to be considered. What kind of shelter is your coop going to provide? Do you need perches or roosts? What kind of insulation should you consider? Should we provide supplemental heat? And how can we improve ventilation to keep our chickens comfortable in these cold winter weather? What kind of feed or additional feed would we need for the winter? Of course, we got to keep that water from freezing. And we're going to have some tips on frostbite protection and then also temperature zones within the coop. So there's different types of housing. There's your typical backyard coop. There's larger coops. This one here looks more like mine. I use outdoor buildings, sheds that have been converted into chicken coops. Your housing should only be limited by your imagination and the laws. You want to be able to protect birds from predators, provide comfort. Natural light is really helpful. If it has electricity or a way to get an electrical cord to it, that's helpful in our cold winter. And then ventilation, natural or electric. So let's take a look at this coop here. We can see that it has an outdoor run that's covered with hardware cloth or chicken netting, and that is to help keep the predators out. It looks like it has a nice base here so that varmints and predators can't crawl underneath and get into the chicken coop. So first, when you're preparing your winter coop, think about your building and your location. Open designed houses with south-facing, with natural ventilation is a plus, so that you can avoid the bitter cold north winds blowing into your chicken coop. A screen door and windows with screens are also very helpful. On those nice, bright, sunny days, or when temperatures, we have those heat waves in the winter, when the temperature gets up to 50 or 60, you may want to open your coop up and just leave the screen door, but cover it partially with burlap or plexiglass to only let some of the warmer air in. That natural shade is helpful, and that helps us more in the summer, of course, than in the winter. And then reflective materials, a white roof for summer heat. And most importantly, space considerations. Do not overcrowd. You need 1.5 to 2 foot of for broilers. And believe it or not, there are some people who will be raising fall broiler chickens here into October and November. They enjoy the cooler temperatures. They don't fight the summer heat. And then for your layers, you're going to need 3 to 5 square foot in that building per layer. You're going to need a feeding area with natural light if possible, a roosting area that's elevated above the ground. It can be 2 feet, but preferably in that 6 to 8 foot range. You're going to need some kind of bedding, straw, shavings, cobs. You're going to need 1 nest for every 4 birds. And of course, you're going to need water. So for our roosts, you need 9 inches per bird. Be cognizant of the temperature zone. You'll want to use your thermometer, because that's one of the thermal zones or temperature zones in your coop. So take the temperature where the nests are, and then also where the roosts are. If it's a comfy 35 degrees or above, you're okay. And you would expect it to be a little bit colder near the ground or the floor of your coop, and warmer as you go up to the rooftop.
Colleen, we're getting some questions that might as well be answered now. So somebody asked, first of all, that if this is being recorded. Yes, it is, and it'll be posted eventually on the University of Minnesota YouTube channel. But also, here's a question. Are these indoor or outdoor space recommendations?
These are indoor space recommendations. Yep, so inside the coop.
All right. What about food and water, in the coop or outside?
One thing that we want to do is reduce the amount of moisture inside. So if temperatures allow, I suggest keeping your water outside until it freezes outside, and then move it inside with some kind of supplemental heat to keep it from freezing. Okay. And then what else? And the feed can be either or. And I would say keep it outside until it's not comfortable for you to be outside feeding and watering them, and then move it in.
Going back to space recommendations, so if those are for inside, then what do you recommend for outside?
You're still going to need that 2.5 to 3 feet per bird outside in your run.
Or more.
Or more, because they need.
I think Minneapolis requires up to 10 square feet per bird.
Okay. Is that
Here's a question for Abby. As participants in the Zoom, will we get an email when it is posted?
Yes, we can certainly do that. I will add that to my to-do list when I post it next week. And then also want to address the question about a white roof. Is that a recommendation to help avoid overheating in the summertime?
Yes, because the heat will reflect. And And actually, we have ways to warm chickens up. We don't have a really good way to cool them off. So a white roof is recommended
Yep.
actually year round.
It can help a lot. Here's another question. What about if your space is too large? How many chickens per square feet is recommended for them to keep themselves warm?
And what I would say there is looking at your chickens, observing them and seeing how they're roosting. And you still want to do this no matter if you think you have adequate space or not. So there's going to be a couple of indications about space. So watch your chickens, see if they're all up at the roost at night. They're going to huddle together and that's how they're going to stay warm. They're also going to puff out their feathers like cardinals do in the wintertime and your outdoor birds. So that's really important that they've got room to puff up. And it also depends on if you've got a light breed like a Leghorn or if you've got a Barred Rock or a Buff Orpington, which is going to take up more space. The other thing is if you have too much room, you can always cordon off a certain area so that you kind of keep them in the area that is going to be most warm. If the birds start picking each other and you get signs of cannibalism, that's when you know you don't have enough space or you need to add some entertainment to your chicken coop, which we're going to talk about that, but it can be as simple as putting some scratch grains in. Okay, so let's move on and well, go
One
ahead.
more question regarding the roosts. How high should they be above the floor, the roost?
It depends how big your chicken coop is. So some of the backyard coops there, they don't allow for 4 feet off the ground. Okay. The main thing is that they're up off the ground, that they're not, and that they're in a temperature zone that's comfortable for them, and how much body heat they're all giving off. So it could be 4 feet. I have mine at about 2 feet from the top of the roof, and I probably have an 8-foot roof in there, just because that heat rises. The other thing with the roofs is you do not want to use metal or plastic because they will conduct that cold weather through and that cold temperature through the feet of the chickens. So you don't want them to freeze their feet off. And really a nice flat board, a 2x4 works well. I use 2x2s for my roosts. And I also, can use a 2.5 to 3 inch round limb of a tree. I use that. I've also used a ladder, an old wooden ladder that I've mounted in another one of my chicken coops for a roost. Okay. So one of the things we want to consider in our winter coops is supplemental heat. So just like you, well, and maybe Wayne pointed this out, just like children, are children going to run outside when it gets below 35 degrees without a coat on? Yes, they are, because they're kids. Are chickens going to run outside when temperatures dip below 35 degrees? Yes, they are. However, we can provide some supplemental heat with a heat lamp. An approved heat lamp with a bulb often provides enough heat. Can you see on my camera? So this is an approved heat lamp. It has a ceramic top to it. It has the wire cage, and I recommend the wire cage because if this drops down into your straw or your bedding, it could start a fire. It gives a little bit more distance. And you can put just a standard light bulb in here, but when it gets really cold, you want to put that heat bulb in there. Another product that we've used, this is a Hog Waterer. And the thing one of my poultry breeders recommended this to me because if this drops down, the heat bulb is here. So you're a good 6 to 8 inches away from the heat source. So you have a little bit more protection than a regular heat lamp. And then also, here's just a smaller heat lamp, or actually it's just a lamp for light. And I'll just talk about this now too, is extending the day length. So right now, as we're at about 12 hours of daylight, and we should be adding some supplemental light, and we can do that with just a lamp like this, and then a timer that your Christmas tree light timer. You set it, and Wayne, I'm going to get your opinion on this too, because they say to add the supplemental light in the morning, because when the light shuts off at night, if the birds aren't up in their roosts, they may not find their roosts. They're going to stay down in that colder temperature zone, and you want them to be able to roost. So I would recommend adding that supplemental light in the morning. So right now, sunrise is right about 7 a.m. So you want to back that up to about 5 a.m. And then if you want to find the sunrise and the sunset, you can go to the Minnesota DNR website, and they will tell you when sunrise and sunset is. And then, of course, we know that right around December 20th is the shortest day length that we have. And then we can start, we want to add light up until December 20th, and then we can start backing off and limiting our additional light supply. So an approved heat lamp with a light bulb often provides enough heat. You want insulation to be adequate, but you don't want it to be too tight that it won't allow for ventilation. One of the things with certain amount of insulation too is you have to keep after the insulation. And if you get mice or rats, they love to live in the insulation. So keep that in mind. When it gets bitterly cold, think about how much insulation's left if you've done a good job with some of those rodent control measures to make sure you have enough insulation left to provide that heat and warmth. And the other main thing here with the heat is to keep them out of the wind. And that's another reason why we have that opening to the south instead of those bitterly north or northwesterly winds that can blow here in Minnesota. So for ventilation, you want to allow for the capacity and the air mixing for the size and the number of birds present. So somebody said before, what if you have too many or too few chickens? You want to balance that. Keep it open to the south. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. Some people keep their chickens open all winter long. Just depends what kind of weather we have here in Minnesota. So you want to regulate the airflow to avoid moisture buildup. And you can do that a number of ways. As I suggested earlier, you can open a window and put partially. You can put burlap over the screen areas. Some people have I'm going to call it a little trap door that has a screen in it, and then they open it on the really warm days, and then they close it on the cold days. And then the other thing you want to do is do the sniff test. If you can smell ammonia, I suggest that you take action. You have too much moisture in the building. So that means, and bird poop is 70% water or more. So you probably have a dirty coop that needs to be cleaned. You can just take the areas of manure out, and quite frankly, that's going to build up under your roost area. You can put I call it a poop board underneath the roost, which would catch a majority of the poop, and that can be cleaned on a daily or a weekly basis, depending on how many chickens you have. to reduce the amount of water or moisture that's in your building. But if you smell ammonia, couple things. You need to increase your ventilation, but also you need to clean up your coop and eliminate what that water source is. And it could be your waterer being inside or spilt water too. A lot of people recommended the deep bedded pack, which is 4 to 6 inches of wood chips or straw on the floor. And I've used this method, especially in those bitterly cold winters. I use a kickboard. So that's a board that's 6 to 8 inches tall, so that the straw doesn't come back out the door, and that I can keep the doorway free of buildup. You as the chicken keeper can stir the bedding with a fork that will allow the manure to settle and go to the bottom layer. The chicken scratching also moves the manure to the bottom layer, and then it provides some heat, and all the moisture is at the bottom, and you can continue to add more straw or more wood chips. And then you have one big cleanup job in the spring. So you want to think about that, or clean the coop often to control moisture. And so for some people, and depending on the number of chickens you have, it could be once a week or once every 2 weeks to clean up after your chickens, and especially the manure, to reduce the amount of moisture buildup in your coop. Any questions about ventilation, manure management in the coop? Okay, we're going to move on to feeding your flock in the winter. The main thing is that you maintain a same diet, provide a protein and balanced nutrition diet. Keep in mind that consumption could increase up to 25%. Make sure that you have plenty of food on hand, and also keep your food in a metal garbage can. I've tried plastic before. The mice and rats can chew through that plastic, and keep a lid on it to keep the predators out. Provide grit and calcium. So that's the free choice cherry stones, and the grit is used to grind the food into a digestible size. A lot of your chickens are not going to be outside. The ground is going to be frozen, so they can't pick up the rocks and other kinds of materials that would help grind up that feed. So that free choice grit is a good idea. Cherry stone, you can get it at your local farm supply store. And then also, it's a good idea to offer free choice oyster shells for strong eggshells. A lot of times your calcium is supplied in your balanced ration. However, I think I just do it especially in the winter because the chickens aren't running around outside, and I don't want to lose any eggs in the winter because production does slow in the months of December, January, February. In the winter, you might consider some supplemental feeds. So the scratch greens in limited amounts, and one recommendation is 1 handful per 10 chickens. It increases their activity level. It stirs that chicken litter, and it prevents boredom. When it gets cold and colder, below 35, an evening feeding will provide the extra carbohydrates to keep the chicken warm at night. Think about yourself, you know, a glass of warm milk before you go to bed, you have a nice warm tummy. So the same thing with the chicken. If they're eating these scratch grains, which is made up of corn or oats, wheat midlands, they scratch around in that, they fill up their crop and their gizzard, and they hold that heat through the evening time, because they're most active in the morning, and then they'll be eating again. Also, you can do some supplemental forages, especially if you're used to having chickens that range. One thing that chickens do not like snow, so that if you can put a bale or half a bale of hay out in the run when you have a lot of snow, then they'll be more apt to go outside and into the sunshine. You can feed them root vegetables, squash, pumpkins, but not potato. There are some plants that chickens that are poisonous to our chicken friends. And then some people supplement with seeds or seed blocks. We kept a few peacocks, and peacocks are a really tropical bird, so we supplemented with black oil sunflower seeds. These seeds provide oil and fats and additional carbohydrates to the chickens in the cold weather. So watering is essential for chickens year-round, and chickens will not eat if they don't have water. You want to keep your water from freezing, but also it's not recommended that you put warm water. Actually, warm water will freeze faster than cold water will. So my go-to method is a heated base with a metal font. These have worked well for me. I raise them up above in the coop on some cinder blocks, cement blocks, some people call them, and I put my heated base down and my metal font on top. The other thing I'll do with my metal water fountains is I'll have 2 of them or 3 of them, depending on how many coops I keep over the winter. But and I'll trade them out every morning. If one freezes, then I'll bring it in the house or actually into our shop. So you can also get a bucket with a thermocube. So the thermocube is a thermostat. It turns on at 35 degrees and stays on if the temperatures continue to drop. But when the temperatures return to 45 degrees, it'll turn back on or shut off, so that it's a way to save energy and electricity. I have not used that method. If anybody has, I'd be interested to hear some of your comments about that. For backyard chicken keepers, a heated dog bowl is really nice. Make sure that your chickens are full grown, or that there's some kind of covering so that the chickens can't get in there and drown. Usually a standard sized chicken, the water is not deep enough, but a small chicken in a heated dog bowl, I mean, could perish. You can also use a heat tape. Here again too, you want to be really careful. And then the other idea is to bring the water in at night and trade out. And that's what I do when it gets really, really cold. And even my heated base isn't keeping up with the temperatures. So there's other ideas, and there's really cool ideas out there on the Great Wide Web. One of them is using an ice cream tin with a light bulb. I'm just going to suggest think safety first when keeping water and electricity don't mix very well. So think about that. Nest management for your winter flock. You'll want to keep your nests clean. Put fresh straw in there. Some people go to extraneous levels and even insulate inside their nest boxes. Pick up your eggs as soon as feasible. Most chickens are typically done laying between around 11 o'clock and 11 to 1. And here again, observe your chickens. If you can be home during the day, figure out when they're laying a majority of their eggs. And I know for right now, my leghorns are laying their eggs in the morning. But I have some Americanas and they're not laying until later in the day. And maybe it's because of how feisty those leghorns are, that they get in there and lay their eggs, get their business done, and get out of there. And my Americanas, they can get kind of broody, and they like to sit in there for a while. So they're, you know, sometimes they don't lay their eggs until right around 1 o'clock or so. Remember that your eggs are largely made up of water, so they will have a tendency to freeze. Can you eat frozen eggs? Sure. But if they're cracked, you want to discard those. There's too much risk for foodborne illness. And the other thing too is the egg, because it has water, it will expand and it'll get that little hairline crack in it. And then when it unthaws, it'll go back together again. So you won't necessarily see that crack. But when you bring them in the house, just make sure that you inspect them really good. One egg is not worth getting food poisoning over. So additional considerations are, think about the type of chicken that you want to raise, and is there one better than the other? No, raise what you like. If you're new to outdoor and backyard chicken keeping, I would suggest choosing a dual purpose breed like a Buff Orpington, a Barred Rock, a Cochin. I'd be interested to have people put in the chat box, and Wayne, if you could share what they've had success with, especially our backyard folks who are just keeping 3, 4 to 6 birds, what breeds of chickens have worked well for them. Also consider the age of the chicken. Is it the most productive years of a chicken are the first, second, and third year? If you have a chicken that's older than that, or kind of unhealthy, maybe had mites, maybe, you know, maybe got picked on by the rooster or the other hens, you may want to consider culling that. If it has particularly low body weight, that might be another reason for culling it, because if it gets below 0, it's going to have a hard time surviving those really cold temperatures.
Colleen, we're getting a wide variety of suggestions here of birds that people like. So starting with Buff Orpington and Wyandottes, I think those are very popular in Minnesota, but also Americanas and the ISA Brown, the California Whites, the Wyandottes again, and Dominiques, the Brahmas, Speckled Sussex. I understand those are good eating birds too, the Sussex. Mm-hmm. And again, Buff Orpington and the Easter Egger, which is the Americana, Australorp, Polish. So everybody's trying a variety of birds, which is fun to see. So,
yep. And for your breed selection, you can some libraries, but in some county extension offices have this standard of perfection. This is from 1993. This book costs anywhere from $110 to probably $130. I know that there's one that's newer than this, but this is the one that I have access to. Things here don't change very much because this is the breed standard. So they have great pictures in here. It tells you about the type, size, quality, and breed of each chicken, how much they weigh, and their purpose. So you can see, you know, the Cochins and then if you have kids in 4-H, this also helps tell you what some of the disqualifications are, what the combs should look like. So if you're looking for a particular breed or a fancy breed, they would be limited. They would be listed in here. And I will say too, we have raised some fancier breeds, and we do have to be really careful with them in the winter because they don't have the feather covering, because they don't have the size to them that other chickens have. If you have some really heavy chickens with some really light chickens, you may want to consider separating them. But first observe them at the feeders. And like I had said earlier, are my leghorns keeping my Americanas away from the feeder? Are they keeping them away from the nest boxes? And the only way you're going to figure that out is to sit and observe them. We talk about ruling the roost. Some breeds and some chickens do rule the roost. And much like in the beef or dairy industry, we've got that boss cow that doesn't let anyone else eat until she's eaten. And so take into consideration what's going on in your coop. You may want to separate your breeds for the winter months so that they get adequate food and that there's enough room for them on the roost so that they can stay warm in these cold Minnesota winters. Thanks for sharing that, and thanks for everyone for writing into the chat box. So one consideration also for winter chickens is frostbite. And this typically happens when we have cold temperatures, but also that there's too much moisture in the chicken coop that it builds up on the chicken's comb, or it's, like I said, it's just dang cold out there. So you can use Vaseline and cover the wattles and the comb liberally with the Vaseline. This helps insulate that comb and prevent frostbite damage.
Colleen, along that line, there was a question about birds drinking out of a heated dog bowl. Would they dip their wattle in the water by doing so, and then would it get frostbite? Possibly.
Possibly. So in that case too, you may want to, if you go out and collect your eggs or check on the chickens at 4 o'clock, or you may have to make a second trip out about 8 o'clock to remove the water and make sure that the wattles and the comb are dried off. And then also apply the Vaseline before it gets too bitterly cold.
So now does the Vaseline also work to treat it if there's frostbite? Not so much?
Not so much. I am not a veterinarian. And I have personally had frostbite, so it's warming that comb up, but the tissue damage is probably already done. And especially when they're so tender, so they could lose their comb. Combs do grow back. However, if it's severe enough, other chickens may start picking at it, and then you'll have cannibalism. So if you have a severe case of frostbite and that chicken is getting picked on by the other birds, you may want to have a sanctuary area for it until its sores heal up and recover. Does that make sense, Wayne?
Yes. Yep, that's fine. The key is to prevent, whether it's on the comb or the wattle or on the feet. You don't want them losing toes either. Right.
Yep. So our take-home message today is prepare your coop before the first snowfall. And hopefully, we're a good 12 weeks out from that, right? Knock on wood. We can only hope. But between September 15th and October 15th is usually our first frost here in Minnesota. Our daylight, so adding that supplemental daylight right now, if you want eggs through the winter, now is the time to add that. And I've got the marker. My husband's birthday is September 22nd. And like I had said earlier, the sunrise is going to be somewhere around 7:03 and it's going to set at like 7:08, something like that. So around his birthday, that's the 12 hours. So I should already have my supplemental light in my chicken coop if I want my chickens to maintain laying over the winter. Some people choose not to, and that's fine.
So some questions are now coming in. Well, I guess should we go ahead and finish up, and then whatever is left, and then there's a few questions coming in.
Yep, sure, let me finish. And then, so keep additional supplies on hand if the power goes out, or if it's really freezing temperature, you want to have extra water to trade out. You want to have enough light bulbs on hand. You want extra straw and bedding. Sometimes people do bank the coop or put additional straw bales out as an insulating factor around the coop. Just be careful of the predators that might attract. Watch your relative humidity. So there's going to, keep the moisture down in your coop. If that includes keeping your water outside until it freezes outside, then bring it inside. Put the base on there to reduce the amount of water that's in your coop, and clean up after your chickens. Follow the best management practices with feed and water, and then provide some kind of air circulation. And people can get really creative with that about how they vent their chicken coops for the winter. And especially the folks with smaller backyard chicken coops that keep them 4 to 6 chickens. And then I'll just say, thank you so much for being with us today. We do have some resources for you at extension.umn.edu Poultry. And then you can follow us on the UMN Poultry Facebook page. When we send out the link to our survey, we will have additional resources in there for you as well. We have some really cool infographics and some other things that people might be interested in. So what kind of questions do we have today, Wayne?
A bunch. So
okay.
Here we go. Let's see. I've got 2 roosts, one higher than the other. I had read the leader would take the high one, but they have all been trying to get up there and only 3 or 4 fit. Should I remove it for the winter?
So the dominant chickens are taking the high roost?
Yep. But they're crowding each other in there. There's apparently not enough space. Mm-hmm. But 3 or 4 are all trying to jam in there.
Yep. So another thing that you can do is put another roost in at the same level, either if it's adjacent to each other. And so that's why my ladder works so nice, my wooden ladder, because there's 2 spots for them to sit. One on the first rung and one on the second rung.
Yeah.
And also at the same level, then they're not pooping on each other either. I would consider, instead of removing one, I would try to put a brace beam in there and try to get it at the same level as the other roost.
What about heated roosts?
If the power goes out and if it stays cold for several days, your chickens are not acclimated to having cold feet. That would be my thought.
Heating pads versus heat lamps.
Now, some people, some people do use those, and very successfully. And they're available at tractor farm supply stores. And I think maybe for a smaller flock, that's really feasible. Just be careful of the electrical connections and make sure that they don't pick through the materials. I would not use a human electric blanket or heating pad. It would have to be made of approved materials that chickens can't peck through, would be my concern with that, so that they don't get electrocuted.
So some people are suggesting the sweeter heater, which is like a thermostat, and you plug I believe a heater into it and it controls it with a thermostat, saying that it's safer than heat lamps.
And that, like the thermal cubes, Wayne, do you? Yep.
All right, so let's see. Insulation of the walls of the coop. Double wall with OSB with insulation, is that too much? I'm not sure what OSB is, but a double wall, so it's pretty thick.
Yep, type of board. Depends what other systems you have for ventilation. If you're keeping the walls warm, you still have to have some kind of ventilation to remove the moisture. So the insulation of the walls is keeping the wind out and providing, in my scenario with this is growing up in that old farmhouse, and on those really cold nights in January, the windows get all frosted up and the curtains are moving, you know, and you got that little skiff of snow there. So that's why you would, you know, you want to keep the wind out. But even with that, you still need some kind of ventilation and something to open up the next day to move that moisture. So yes, you can get too tight. And the other thing too, if you have, so what's our vector for disease? Moisture is a part of that. So if your building is too tight and you start seeing some diseases, some respiratory issues, that would be an indication that your building is too tight and you also need some ventilation.
So apparently the sweeter heater is somebody that says it's infrared heat. Not certain on that. So that infrared heat heats living tissue, not the air. So it has to be direct on the birds. Any infrared would have to be direct on the living tissue in order to heat it. And then let's see. So is there a temperature range inside the coop during the cold months that is acceptable?
Yes, so let's go back up to that thermal and use our thermal neutral zone. Is it 65 to 75 degrees?
Yep.
Would be where we want to be. But, you know, the other thing too, place that thermometer by the nests, by the roosts, and down at the floor. And if chickens, you know, if it gets down to 50 or 40 degrees, the chickens are still going to be active. It's when it gets super cold and they stay on that roost all day, huddled, and below 35 degrees, possibly that you want to add that supplemental heat.
So there's a question about the humidity range. At what point it becomes a concern?
Yeah. Humidity.
I'm not sure about the exact range myself, but I just know that too much moisture is a problem in the coop, because that leads to respiratory illness.
Yes. So here's your answer. This is the technical answer. If the air temperature is 10 degrees Celsius, it contains 5.7 grams of moisture. The relative humidity is 5.7 divided by 9.5 times 100 is 60%. So if the same air is heated without adding moisture until it reaches a temperature of 20 degrees Celsius, the relative humidity would be about 33%. So it can be concluded that heating air results in lower relative humidity. Conversely, cooling the air will result in higher relative humidity if the same air was 4 degrees Celsius. So that would be 89% humidity. This demonstrates that the warmer the air, the greater capacity to contain moisture. So that's one thing that we want to be cognizant of when we are heating our coops in the winter, that we still want to maintain a lower relative humidity. Relative humidity in poultry houses is measured to determine whether the respiratory disorders are due to too high or too low of relative humidity. So this does become a factor in large poultry houses and production facilities. And then also the same, if we overheat and add too much heat and have too much moisture in our coops, if the relative humidity is too high, the condensation will accumulate in the house, and this has a direct effect on the growth of microorganisms, which is a vector for disease. So yes, you can get it too warm in there. And if you see, if the windows are sweating and the walls are sweating, or if you go in there and the other thing too, if you've got that high humidity, your smell test is going to kick in. It's going to smell in there.
And it's important to appreciate that the birds, their sense of smell is much more sensitive, much stronger than ours. So if we can smell it, it's already impacting the birds.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the thing is too, if it gets that hot in there, and then they step outside and it's 0 out, I mean, they're gonna seize up, kind of, and start to be. I mean, they're gonna get really cold, and the frostbite will kick in too. So
there's a discussion about whether or not to heat, and somebody has mentioned that they see conflicting information from different universities, and birds can handle sub-freezing temps just fine. Sub-freezing being 32 or below 32. However, at 10 degrees, that can lead to frostbite. And then mentions that a place in Iowa, Sandhill Preservation Center, does not have heated pens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So my question there would be yes, universities are going to have, because we're located in different parts of the country. So, and I think you were with me, Wayne. We went on that SARE tour, and we're in the middle of Indiana, the lower part of Indiana, and they keep their chickens outside all winter long. Well, they don't have, snow like we have, and wind.
Right.
The other
they
thing
don't have Minnesota cold.
Right. And then the other thing is what breed of chickens? So, if you've got a silver spangled Hamburg that weighs 3 pounds, a light leghorn that weighs 3 pounds, that's not acclimated. And I think that's probably the other key too. When you choose to heat or not to heat, what are you doing to help the birds acclimate to the Minnesota climate or the climate that you live in? That would be the question.
Yeah.
What are you willing to do? Yeah. Because there's a YouTube video on by Alaska Extension, and they do not use any supplemental heat. They use that deep bedded pack. She has 7 chickens in her coop.
Mm-hmm. But that deep bedded pack provides some heat. It's
right.
Yeah, it is composting, so it's warming up in there.
Yeah. Okay, what other kinds of questions do we have, Wayne?
Well, let's see. Okay, moving away from, so I have 3 new 5-month-olds that just joined 6 other hens. One of the young ones is a Polish mix and is very skittish. She chooses to be on the lowest roost by herself, but I put her up on the high roost each night. Should I be concerned about her roosting by herself close to the ground?
You have chickens that are ruling the roost. She's probably the smallest one in there.
Yeah, she's the young one added to the mix.
Yeah, she's the young one. And the other question I would have about that is giving her and making sure that she is getting feed and that she's not being bullied out of the feed trough. Make sure that you have adequate space for all your chickens to feed at the same time. And maybe just observe as well that she's probably getting a little bullied, but she'll probably be okay. Those little ones, they're scrappers.
Yeah.
Colleen, that kind of leads to a question that was asked almost at the very beginning. is they have a broody hen, and what should they do with the chick once it hatches and we're entering such colder weather?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this is where I would put that broody hen in a rescue pen. Separate her from the other hens, the other part of the flock, and raise those chicks separately and provide supplemental heat. You could take the chicks away from the broody hen, depending on what your thought process is on that, or just let her raise them naturally in their own separate pen, but providing supplemental heat in that area so that they all thrive. And she's going to need some special, if she's setting right now, she probably needs some additional water and nutrition too. Does that help?
Definitely. If they take the chick away, they'll need supplemental heat for the chick.
Oh yeah. Well, and hopefully there's more than one chick.
Yeah. Here's an interesting comment.
Only one chick, I wouldn't take it away from its mother. I'd let her do her thing.
Yeah.
I would separate them from the rest of the flock.
So an interesting comment to think about. Beware with extension cords with backyard chickens. We had our home insurance canceled because of it. So if you're going to have a backyard coop, you may have to install, you may have to run an electrical line to it to satisfy your insurance company. So it'd be worthwhile to check with them before you use an extension cord.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
A comment regarding, I have only 4 chickens. Can I even do deep litter? We have a 4x8 coop. Is that enough poop to start composting?
4x8 is, yeah.
With 4 birds in it.
You may have to go in and mechanically stir that. I'm not sure that 4 chickens, that's
a big space.
Much space, yeah.
That's twice as,
Turn
if
it
you
with
consider
a
5 square feet per bird inside, which would be 20 square feet, that's over half again as much space as they really need inside.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be hard to do.
Mm-hmm. But you can make that space smaller.
Yeah.
And put a kickboard in so that it's not spilling out into the and actually that's a nice area. Then you can store your feed inside and your grit and all that stuff inside that coop. Just make it a little smaller, just button it up a little bit.
Will birds naturally move to the inside roost as it gets colder, or do I need to train them? Since we got them this spring, they have only used the roost in the run and never went to the indoor roost at night. They only go indoor to lay.
They'll adapt to weather. I think the chickens are pretty adaptable. And they like being outside right now. I mean, my only, and especially now that the mosquitoes have, that would be my only concern too, is that they don't get bit up by too many mosquitoes. But that's what they get. They got their feathers and they fluff out and they find ways to protect themselves.
Let's see. There was another question up here. Oh, somebody just saying that they had a coop fire from a fallen heat lamp. So just cautioning everyone to be really careful with heat lamps. They've got to be really secure in order to not fall into the bedding.
And so heat lamp safety is very important. You want to make sure that your heat lamp is secured. And even when people or predators or even the hen that's roost takes flight, think about everything that they stir up, and they'll hit that heat lamp. So we make sure we have a drop chain that we use from the ceiling that our heat lamp is secured to. The other thing is like use some zip ties, not just wire to secure your cord to prevent electrical shock. Yes, we have had close calls here on the farm. We've had, my brother-in-law was using a heat lamp on a goat, and the mama goat kicked the heat lamp and his barn burnt down. So, you know, that's why, you know, these are regular. I like these a little bit better.
All right, some more questions.
Yep.
So if you switch from a dog bowl to having a nipple waterer, how easy is it for the birds to make that change in their drinking habit?
So they will need to be trained. How diligent are you as the master of training chickens? You could be the chicken whisperer. It's going to take some time. But you can do it. I know you can.
I have 5-month-old Brahmas that may not be laying by the time the days shorten. They're already shortening. Should I keep them on grower feed over winter or change to layer at 6 to 8 months of age? Layer feed. They're now 5 months. Should he change?
Yep. So I would change them to layer feed because they're not, and because it's less expensive and it's lower in protein.
Yeah.
Your
They're ready for it.
Is higher in protein, and you're paying a little bit more for that. Now, if you have molting chickens and you want them to go back into production, that's when you would go back to feeding that grower or broiler developer, because it's higher in protein. And so that's one tip that I've learned about molting chickens, is to feed them higher protein to get them back out of their mold. It will repair their feathers faster, so they'll start laying again. So when you have chickens at 5 months old now, a couple things here that you can do to get them to lay is increase their light. Make sure that their nest boxes are nice, comfy, cozy, and cleaned, and then put in a Gomer egg. So this can be a golf ball. It can be an Easter egg, plastic Easter egg. And there are Gomer eggs out there. They're glass. I have a couple of antique ones, and you put those in the nests to teach them where they're supposed to be laying their eggs. If that makes sense, but I've had to do it before. The other thing at 5 months, you know, what do they weigh? If they get the right weight on them here, and if they have enough light, they'll start laying here a little bit before, well, they'll lay October and November. And if you keep the supplemental light on them, they'll lay December and January as well.
So somebody mentioned that it is pretty easy to train the birds to a nipple waterer, that you do need to grab them manually and touch their beak to the nipple, and they'll just go right to it. Any recommendation on coop designs?
If you have backyard, if you're in a city, make sure that you follow your city ordinances. Some city ordinances will tell you how far it needs to be from the home, from adjacent properties, and then sometimes how high it has to be up off the ground. And the actual dimensions, and some city ordinances even require that it has the same facade as the house. So if you live in a blue house, your chicken coop has to be blue, and it has to be made of the same materials. So check your city ordinances. Now, there are a ton of different chicken coop plans out there, and I would say build to the scale that you want your operation to be. If it's, and how many chickens you want to keep over winter. So if it's 20, if it's 30, if it's 15, build to that scale. And then all the things that we just mentioned today, pick the site first, something that's south facing. Make sure that it has plenty of ventilation. Make sure that you have room for all the nest boxes and the roosts for the number of chickens that you want to raise. Wayne, do you have, we have that agri plan. We have people even in Minnesota that still do chicken tractors in the middle of the winter here. And there's a ton of plans out there.
Yeah. Midwest Poultry has a plan also for a small scale unit, small scale hut. And then somebody is recommending online here a place called Down East Thunder Farm, that they have a nice hut and like it well. Let's see. Oh, then Backyard Coops on Facebook is being recommended for ideas. Let's see. Any advice for getting chickens to stop pooping in their nest box? Ours are 3 months and not yet laying, but we clearly don't want them getting used to doing so and then keeping that habit when they are laying.
I
That's
would
a tough one.
Yeah, I know. What's currently in your nest box that's attracted to them to poop in there? Is it wood shavings? Is it nothing? Is it straw? That would be my question. And then I would change that material out and I would put Gomer eggs in. If they're going in the nests, they might figure out that they're supposed to lay eggs in there and not poop. And then keep the nests clean. Clean it out every night.
Oh, and so along that line, a question, and then we'll make these last couple of questions. We better quit here, folks.
Yeah.
Let's see. One was, will chickens build a nest? If you have loose straw in there, will they kind of use that to insulate themselves, or will they just lay down on the straw?
Yeah. No, they will build nests. If you get a broody hen that doesn't want to lay in a nest box, she'll make her own nest down in the ground. If there's not enough nests, or if she's getting picked on, she'll go lay her eggs in the corner. I've found, different, and if she gets broody, if she wants to lay, if she wants to be a mom, she'll lay her eggs someplace other than the nests. And so if you don't want her to be broody, then you got to take the eggs away from her, mess her nest up, and put her over by the feed and water. Otherwise, just let her do her thing in the corner. But yes, they will. They'll make their own. They'll make their own nests if there's not adequate nests, or if they're dirty. Or if they like the material better on the floor than what's in the nest. If they want to sit down, and especially if they're broody. These are all great questions. Thank you so much.
Well, and I would just add that we do need to end the webinar and the discussion for today. But by all means, please feel free to write us by email or give us a phone call. Any of those work. And stay in touch with us. Whenever you have a question, we'll do our best to find an answer for it.
Mm-hmm. Is that all the questions we have, Wayne?
That's pretty much it. There was one question about, I think, should a heat lamp be directly on the roost or indirect heat from the heat lamp?
I suggest indirect heat.
Yep, it's too strong otherwise.
Yep, and they'll stay away. I want to thank Abby Neuschaft and Wayne Martin for being with me today, and all of you have joined us today for preparing your coop for the winter. The University University of Minnesota Extension, where we're driven to discover making a difference in environment, food and agriculture, communities, families, and youth. Have a great day.
Goodbye, everybody.